Welcome, welcome. It's book club episode at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We are your messy, imperfect homeschool mom podcast where you can just come and hang out and join us and just be yourself, right? My name is Meagan, and my fabulous co-host here is...
Hello, it's Amanda.
Welcome. And we are finishing up our discussion this week, our discussion between Amanda and I, of Jonathan Mooney's book, Normal Sucks. We're reading chapters 7 and 8 this week, or I should say we read them and we're discussing them in this week's episode. We have one more episode, which is next week, and that is our author visit. So I'm super excited about that. So Amanda, how does our virtual book club here work? What if somebody's chosen this as our first episode or their first episode to tune in and they're like, why am I in a book club on Spotify? What's happening here?
Yeah. What has happened? I thought I was listening to a homeschool podcast. Like, what is going on? So, right. We are all about trying to make your life easier. So you have your choice. If you want to look up the page breakdown and read along with us and participate and tell us that we're dumb as we talk about things, you are welcome to do that. But you're also welcome to just listen and be like, I don't really need to read this, but I love the Cliff Notes if you're old like me, or Spark Notes if you're apparently young, because that's what they're called now.
The kids
You're
are
welcome.
calling it these days.
Right. So yeah, you're welcome to listen along and, take the highs and the lows. And then, maybe you're listening and you're like, man, that actually sounds like a really good book. Maybe you go on and buy it, or maybe you enter our drawing for the giveaway that we're giving away here in just a couple weeks. Or if you're listening to this down the road, sorry, you missed the giveaway, but it was great. So yeah, you absolutely don't have to read along, but we hope you enjoy listening to us and our thoughts and walk away with some new ideas or some new thoughts yourself.
Exactly. So we are on sections 7 and 8 this week. And I guess we'll just jump right in. I have the first note amongst our kind of collection of thoughts for the week. And I just wanted to read this section on page 168 because it made me nauseous and simultaneously want to cry. So if you're just joining our conversation about this book, Jonathan Mooney, I'm kind of guessing his age is, I think, around late 40s, is an individual with a diagnosis, dyslexia diagnosis and ADHD diagnosis, and kind of went through special education in the public school system before special education was kind of reformed to where it is today. It's still not amazing, but it's better than it was when he was going to school. And so a lot of this book talks about his experience. So there's a story in here. It starts on page 167, goes to page 168. And I can't even describe it. It makes me so upset. But there's this thing where they did an experiment where basically they put a dog in a cage. Not Jonathan Mooney. Hold on. Let me clarify that. He's recounting. He'll be getting hate mail if I don't tell the story properly. Could you even imagine? Okay. Not Jonathan Mooney. He's recounting an experiment that a psychologist or a psychiatrist did where this person, who's not Jonathan Mooney, put a dog in a cage, and the cages were, parts of the cages were electrified, and the dog, when it would try to hide from the pain or cower from a painful experience, would go in the other direction and encounter more pain, and that alone is horrifying and made me want to cry, made me want to throw up all at the same time. But then he talks about the fact that it explained how he felt in school. And he said, I'd show up in the morning and my foot started bouncing. Jonathan, hallway. First shock. Next class was reading. Grab, see spot, run, and hear it for the rest of the day from all the other kids. Jonathan, go back to your retarded reading group. Sorry, that's not my word. It's in the book. And I'm sure that was his life experience. So even though I hate the R word, it's in the book. Next shock. Next is recess, where the last person picked in the classroom is often the last picked on the playground. That's me. Another shock. Then it's reading out loud time and I hid in the bathroom. Another shock. Then I go home and my dad starts up with, what's wrong with you, Jonathan? Last shock. All the shockers are on and I have nowhere to hide. And the whole visual between him and the dog and the whole thing, I couldn't. The whole thing just made me so upset that this is how, as a society, we treat individuals who learn differently, communicate differently, experience the world differently. And it's just, it was so devastating for me. I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
So that was my first one.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a quick aside. You clarified that Jonathan Mooney did not shock a dog. I am the one that actually follows our stats and looks at things. And I know for a fact that when we started doing this book, we had a big spike in LA. So in case you're listening, Jonathan, I think that maybe you're in your mid 40s, not late 40s. Okay.
Okay, I never said I was good at math. I was just working off the dates that he went to Brown. I'm like, I think he said he went to Brown in like 99. And I remember being like, I graduated high school then. So something like that. I just remember thinking like, oh, I think he's just a little bit older than me. And I'm 43. So that's mid to late. Okay, we'll say, Now I want to Google it.
I know, right? It can't be that hard. He's like a world-renowned speaker. Like, it's pretty easy. I mean, clearly, we've not done our research for today, except for reading his book. Anyway.
And did not shock treat a dog. Could you imagine? Oh my gosh. It's just awful.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just so terrible.
It is a terrible story. And then the story continues, right, with a boy, a school-age boy who is like, I mean, if this was real life, you'd get high and then kill yourself. And, probably spoken from life experience, something that he's actually known. I mean, it's one of those great examples of things that you read in here that he covers a lot of deep stuff. And it's not also bleak, right? We've talked about that before. It's a great read.
Yeah.
He's an awesome storyteller. He weaves things together in a way that doesn't make you want to jump off your condo balcony every time. But there is some
that
serious
one
stuff.
that was a gut punch. That one, I was like, oh my goodness. Then I see we both kind of made some notes on page 170 and 171. There was a thing in here talked about in the fall of 2008, New York University's Child Study Center launches this campaign to raise awareness about childhood mental health issues. Again, their wording, not mine. The campaign consisted.
I was with it, right? I'm like, childhood mental health issues. Like, this is a real thing, right? We've got a lot more knowledge about this. We need to do more about this. There's a lot more mental health struggles. There's a lot more bullying. Like, okay, yeah, I'm here. Great. Like, what did they say? Wah.
Yeah, I'll tell you what they said. So they decide to spend a boatload of money on ads, billboards, all the stuff, kiosks, etc., newspaper, magazines, websites, etc., where they did things like this. It said, I saw in New York Magazine a handwritten note akin to those created by hostage takers, which read, we are in possession of your son. We are making him squirm and fidget until he is a detriment to himself and those around him. Ignore this and your kid will pay. Signed, ADHD. What the fuck? This isn't that long ago. 2008 is when my oldest teenager was born, and I still consider him like a baby, right? I mean, he's 16, but like literally he left for school today, and he was walking out, and I had to like tiptoe myself way up into the stratosphere to give this kid a hug and a kiss goodbye before he left for school. But he's still my baby, right? 2008 was not that long ago. No, he should have known better than this in 2008. What the fuck?
Right?
Crazy.
Yeah, no, exactly. The next one, we have your son. We will make sure we will make sure he will no longer be able to care for himself or interact socially as long as he lives. That's from autism.
Autism,
yeah.
Exactly.
And then Asperger's, which we've talked about, right? He was a bad guy, but some people still really feel for that. And if you don't know what that label means, that's people who are on the spectrum, but are also intellectually gifted, and it's a subset within there. There's some other things to it, but that gives you a general idea of what Asperger's syndrome is. It says, we have your son. We are destroying his ability for social interaction and driving him into a life of complete isolation. It's up to you now. Like, oh my, I know plenty of people who consider themselves Aspies, because I'm of the generation that was a diagnosis that was there, and it's an identity. They are not living lives of complete isolation. Like, I know them, I talk to them, I've seen them, like, they're like, holy, yeah, I like. And then my note was like, it's absolute garbage, right? The fact that we were putting this out, that it was put this way, it was presented this way. And, sure, refusing to accept your child as they are may cause all of these things. They may completely withdraw into themselves. They may pay and never feel accepted, but that is not the same as having some kind of a learning difference or even a learning disability, like that. Yeah, no.
Yeah. I
Just
mean,
embrace your child where they are.
and this is only 16 years ago. I mean, earlier in the book, when Jonathan Mooney is giving us kind of the medical history of the term normal,
Mhm.
and he's talking about, this was back in the days of doctors using leeches and stuff like this. These billboards, to me, should be in the leeches days, right? Not 16 years ago, that this is what we were still saying 16 years ago. And so it's no wonder that Jonathan Mooney had the experience that he had in the world of special education in, the 80s and the 90s, if this is what we're doing in the 2000s. I mean, it was even more archaic than when he was in school and being treated like, a complete piece of garbage, basically, by the establishment at large.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, this is the stuff they were saying when you were having babies. I wasn't even at the point yet of thinking about having babies, right? I mean, I was
Yeah.
like hitting up happy hour, but this is not that long ago. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy.
It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Um, so I didn't even have a chance, just life being busy as it is, right? Like, I had entered my notes into the Google Doc, and when I did mine, yours weren't there yet, but I was like ridiculously early because I had time to kill on a plane. So, right? And now I'm noticing just how much our notes lined up this week, which isn't always the case. So it's kind of fun to see. So what did you
Yeah.
jot down on 173?
So I noticed, right, because I typed mine up last night. I did it late. But one of the things that I noticed was we have a lot of the same pages, but as is usual for us, we don't have a lot of the same exact thought process. So it should be an interesting conversation. So on page 173, right, on 173, it says, I took the quote, "I was being celebrated because of my ability to approximate a specific expectation of normality. This type of inclusion tolerates differences as long as these differences do not demand excessive change from any institution." Obviously, the quote goes on. But that's one of those things. It's so true, right? It really hit home for me. It doesn't matter if it's a physical or a mental difference. It's okay as long as you can pretend that you're normal. If you can pretend, if you can mask, and you can make sure that you're not inconveniencing anyone,
Yeah.
then it's okay for you to have these things. And not only okay, but we'll embrace it, right? We'll embrace it because you're an excellent example of like, look, this person can have this thing, but they can be normal and fit in. And, it's really hard in all the different ways and for all of the different reasons. For me personally, reading this, it really made me think of a friend that I have. I have an amazing friend who is really, really good at accommodating the things that I need and my physical health issues and my cognitive health issues, but that's a whole other story. But it has taken me years to find someone who gets it and is understanding and has never ever once made me feel bad when I said, you know, I can't drive to you. I would love to get together for a coffee. I would love to do that, but I can't get to you. I'm sorry. Like, I'm just not. And never once has she said anything other than, I'm happy to drive down to you. Like, what time do you want me to show up? And like, I can only hope that it is getting easier, right? I mean, I have had health problems for decades at this point. Is it getting easier for our kids? I mean, I don't know, because in some ways it feels like we're going backwards so much on so many things. But then in other ways, I feel like, man, we are raising kids who get it, right? They get so much more. Does that mean they're going to be better friends? They're going to do a better job of not being shitty people?
I think I don't know. I mean, we live on complete opposite coasts of one another, right? You're in San Diego and I'm in Charleston. So like we don't hang out together in person. So I don't know your friend circles and I don't know the environment that you live in. But I have the feeling that it's half better, right? Or it's halfway okay. And the reason that I say that is because our country seems to be very politically divided right down the middle, right? And there seems to be this pervasive, like, everybody's too sensitive, everybody wants to be included, everybody wants to be accommodated, etc., from half of the group, right? And then the other half is like, why is including people bad? Why is representation in a Target ad bothering you so much? Right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I wonder if part of your hope and optimism is where you live and the people that you've surrounded yourself with, the community that you've built for yourself there. Because I think so last night I was posting clips for social media and stuff of last week's podcast episode and talked about, living in the South and kind of the odd cultural dynamic that exists as a result. And like the t-shirts that I see just going to the supermarket and stuff like that are like so brutally offensive. And I'm like, wow, okay. Like I'm not offended by them personally. You know what I mean? Like, but it's more just like, wow, that seemed like that was a shirt that you saw and you were like, yes, that is the message I would like to convey
I
to the
want to
world
wear
about
that. Yeah.
my core belief system. You know what I mean? Like I'm not offended by your shirt, but like I'm like, wow, you're so committed to that thought process and that ideology that you're like, okay, good. And so like the kids of people, like there's kids being raised in those households, right? Where, when it's like it's Pride Month right now, and I feel like that's bringing out like the worst in so many people, right? Because it's like, here we go again with equality, here we go again with inclusion, and I'm like, oh my goodness, right? And we have the same thing during Black History Month and the same thing during that, and it's like, I feel like during those months we see like the worst of people. And I'm like, there's kids who are listening to that all day long at home and getting that messaging. And so that's the part that makes me think that it's like such an uphill climb to try to change anything, because accommodating other people, it's like, buck up, toughen up, come on, snowflake, and I'm like, okay, but like my kid's super autistic, so maybe we could just turn the music down a little. Like it wouldn't hurt anyone. Just saying, like, like he can wear his noise canceling headphones. He can meet you halfway, but like, could you meet him halfway? Like, is that okay? Maybe.
Yeah, right. That's the thing, right? Like, what happened to compromise and meeting halfway? It feels like it's really lost. Yeah, but that's a whole other. We could talk about that forever.
Yeah.
You have one more note. Well, actually, did you have anything else that you wanted to say specifically about this? Like having to approximate normal. Or
I
do
mean,
you want to go ahead and move on to your next?
I just liked the line in there that said, like, just don't ask society to change, right? Like, we're okay with, it says, my story was being used to tell these kids their differences were deficiencies that they had to overcome with hard, tireless work. Here, differences would be tolerated, even celebrated, as long as they did not demand the school to change. And I feel like the same could be said for society at large, right? Like, I mean, we're like lighting up the Empire State Building blue for autism, which is like, gag me with a spoon, because autism speaks is disgusting. But, it's like they're happy to slap some puzzle pieces on stuff. But to actually meet the needs of an autistic individual at a doctor's appointment or in a grocery store or at a restaurant or whatever the case might be, we're taking it a bit far now. right? Like, how much do I have to now cater my life around you? But I'll put puzzle piece magnets on my car, or, whatever the case might be. And I'm not pro puzzle piece. Do not take that from what I'm saying. Right. So that was like the big takeaway for me, is like, we have to get past the point where we're doing things for show or for advertisement and stuff like that, but actually like walk the walk. Let's do the thing. Let's support the people who need the support, and let's just meet people where they need to be, and they'll meet us where we need to be. And oh my goodness, wouldn't that be a utopic society? I think we're a long way off.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree with that, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, but I love that you're feeling optimistic. It means that you've built yourself a nice community of people, at least for the most part, Let's see. Oh, I just loved this. The other note that I had in this section was at the very end of this chapter on page 183, he's quoting another author and saying the terms normal and abnormal have no place in scientific thinking. They have no place in our lives, in your life. Difference is not normal, which has always been and always will be statistical fiction. Differences are true. Difference is essential. Difference is a fact in the world. In fact, it is the world. And so this whole book has talked about this striving for normalcy and sameness and uniformity. And the reality is we do need different thinking. Like years ago, I used to teach this class where I talked about people who approach the world differently. It was kind of this general idea. And, I brought up that movie. Do you remember that movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks? When they're,
Yes.
And I'm not a super space like aficionado. If it wasn't for Tom Hanks, I probably wouldn't have watched the movie. And it was like the big blockbuster that summer. It was like the thing to do, right? So I can't tell you that I like know everything about the Apollo program. All I remember is they're in the capsule, things are going to hell in a handbasket, and they're talking to the people in Houston, and all the people in Houston are like, what the hell are we going to do? Right. And so it's like, I always kind of use this example when I was talking to like students that I had and said like, okay, in that room, I don't want 50 people who have the exact same thought process, because those guys that are in the bubble are completely fucked if they all have the same thought process, right? Mm-hmm. You need people who problem solve differently, who think differently, who view things from a different angle. You need that in that scenario, because that's where we make real breakthroughs in things. Mm-hmm. And then having people that all think the same, but yet still as a society, we're like, wow, let's all be as same as humanly possible, right? As a society as a whole, not everyone, obviously, but so I loved that quote at the end. I found that really meaningful.
I feel like we're having an ELA lesson, and that's the bridge into chapter 8. I'm always talking about the bridge, and don't forget to write the bridge between your paragraphs.
Take us there.
That does totally flow into section or chapter 8, which is called Normal People Are People You Don't Know Very Well. And I thought that was interesting. I struggled with, because I get a little bit literal with these things. I struggled a little bit with exactly how we got that title, right? I didn't feel like it honed in on that exactly, but I got a lot of great things from this chapter. And so I'll just do a general recap, like we're starting, right? And it's starting out, and he's talking about how in his 20s, he hoped success as an author and a public speaker and an Ivy League school graduate would be enough. And it wasn't, right? And it really made me think, like, is it enough for anyone? Like, how many of us want to go back and redo our 20s first off, right? Like, foo, no thank you. Like, I do not need to relive my 20s.
Okay, wait, I did see something the other day, though, that was like, I wasted all of my skinny years in my 20s thinking I was fat, and now I'm really hostile about that. Like, so if I could just do that part again. Right?
Yeah, right. But I mean, that's the thing, right? You spent your 20s, like all these years that you had more energy and you were healthier and all of these things, thinking that you weren't good enough and that you needed to be better and like you just weren't enough. Your 20s are full of believing that you're not enough. And like at what point, like what, just that thing of, you spend so much time trying to prove yourself and trying to fit into this adult world that, and you realize, right, that like as a teenager, you thought you knew everything. And now you're realizing in your 20s that like, oh shit, I really don't know anything at all. But you're like still trying to prove that you're ready to be a grown up.
We're faking it till we make it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting. And there was a quote a little in that, like further on, where someone else was saying that they were frantically stacking up achievements. And I was like, boy, howdy, isn't that most of us? Like trying to get the job, the better job, the promotion, the engagement ring, the next thing, all of these things you're supposed to have to show that you did it right. You got another 80 years to do it right. Like let your 20s go.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm just thinking about all of my own 20s and I'm thinking like, okay, because I wasn't a very career driven, but I wanted family and kids. So from that, I was like, well, does that apply to me? And then I was thinking, not really. Well, I did want family and kids. So like the race to like, get married, have kids, have the house, decorate the house, like,
all those things you thought you had to do in your 20s that really you could have slowed down. You could have done them in your late 20s, your early 30s.
Exactly.
It would have been fine.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. How old do you mind if I ask? Because I'll edit it if you do. So just tell me, how old were you when you had your kiddo?
34.
Okay.
Almost 34. Yeah.
Yeah. So you did the stuff you like, and I know you lived abroad and stuff like that too. So you were like really going after it. I like it.
Yeah. But I did it. I got married right out of college and I had no business getting married at that point, but that was the expectation, right?
Right.
It was if you haven't met your significant other in college, then how are, like you've got to meet them in college and you get married after college and then you start the things, right? These are the steps that you start. And I think it's a little different now, right? I mean, we're talking the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. I think that timeline is getting pushed out a little bit more, but it's still a 20s. I mean, you see most of Instagram is women in their 20s telling you about how they have their life together. And I just can't help but think like, you have no idea. You have no idea.
You're so cute.
Okay.
Yeah. So great. My Instagram feed is filled with talking dog videos, dog voiceovers, so I don't get as many of those. I do like the ones where it's like a dog lounging on a sofa and it's like, I have 2 incomes and I vacation 4 times a year and whatever, like follow me for more financial advice, and I'm like, those are my videos on Instagram. The algorithm gets me. So oh my goodness. Yeah, that's so true though. I didn't pull that from this section, but I love that you did because it totally makes sense. Yeah. I see we do both have the same note on page 192, which is interesting. And noted kind of the same things, right? Like people are only willing to provide accommodation if somebody is willing to pathologize themselves. And also I like to add to that HIPAA violate themselves as well, right? Like I don't owe you a diagnosis for anything, right? You don't owe anybody an explanation about anything. You can just say, I need XYZ, but our society doesn't function that way. It's like, on the one hand, we have HIPAA that takes everything so seriously. And then on the other hand, we're like, we're going to need all documentation in order to accommodate the fact that you need to type instead of handwrite. And it's like, okay, but why? Right? Why?
Yeah.
Why? When did we become so cynical that we need proof to meet somebody where they're explaining suits them?
Yeah, no. And from a personal, and I realize that this book, I've done a lot of speaking from a personal perspective and standpoint. We don't have a kid on here to tell us what it feels like for them in school currently. But it feels awful to be sitting in HR trying to explain what accommodations you need and why you need them. And, they're doing that dance around because they know they can't come right out and ask you, but they're also not going to give it to you unless you justify it because it's a cost and it's extra work.
Ugh.
And, it's a terrible conversation. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I have sat in an HOA meeting in my own homeowners association asking for accommodations. And again, it's that thing. They can't ask you things, but their legal is involved in the process to make sure that they're covering themselves. And like you're trying to make sure, and you just want to be like, look, my doctor put it all through and you've got my doctor's letter. Like, can't we just, but it's so complicated and there's so many, and it's on you, like you as the disabled person, you as the person with the difference. You've got to show up with all of your extra energy that you have, like, come
Don't
on.
have and need
Yeah,
to
exactly. Right.
dig, take
Yeah.
from something else that's actually
Yeah,
important.
exactly.
Not that it's not important to get an accommodation, but like something that's important to you personally, as far as like, it could be like your kid's event or something. And it's like, well, now I'm borrowing spoons from that to put towards this when this shouldn't be a fight, right?
Yeah.
Like this should just happen.
Absolutely. And then that doesn't even begin to address the conversation that had to happen in the very beginning, whether it was with your doctor or, a private psychologist, if you went that route. And if you went that route, you probably started, I know in our family, I started with the schools because, they make such a big deal about how you can get the assessments for free from your public school district. Like, okay, good luck with that. And then after you're tired of fighting that fight, you finally go to your pediatrician, and then you have to have this conversation. You have to convince them that you
Yes.
know what you're talking about and that your kid needs this. And then, they're going to give you a random list of people to check with that are not all right, and now you have to go and research all of these, educational psychologists or whatever. Do you want a neuropsychologist? Do you want an educational psychologist? Do you want this kind? Do you want that kind? And now you got to go through that process of researching that and figuring out which one is going to be right. Then you got to start making the calls and see who's actually taking new people and how much they charge, and will you take insurance, and and like there's so much that has to happen even before you have to sit in the awkward conversation with the school or with the organization you're trying to join or the after school camp or the like there's so much you have to do. And then it's still like, okay, but make sure you carry that label, like put that label on really big, and then still do your absolute best to be normal so that you don't inconvenience anyone while you wear your giant billboard label. Like,
exactly. Yeah. I was thinking too, there's that layer. I'll add one more step in yours, which is when the doctor says you need the thing, and then you call to schedule the thing, and you have to see if they take insurance. Then you have to fight the insurance company to get them to realize that a medical doctor who knows you, who has met you or your child or whatever, has said they need the thing. But the insurance company would who's some nameless random doctor who works for the insurance company, who's never met you, has spent about 3.2 seconds looking at your file, has decided you don't need the thing.
You don't need the thing. Yeah.
And it's like, and if you're listening to us from a country with universal health care, we are simultaneously envious of you and slightly hostile, right?
Yeah. Because I don't think I've ever convinced the insurance company that I did in fact need the thing that the doctor said I needed, that they said I didn't. Like the insurance company is always right. So it's like, I mean, you fight it, right? Because it's the difference of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But the whole time you're fighting it, you're putting more money into your HSA or your FSA or trying to figure out how you're going to move savings around to pay for this thing, because right? Like you finally got there with the doctor and that this is the next step. And as you fight the good fight, you also simultaneously know that insurance isn't going to pony up anything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I won my ADHD meds case though for my kiddo. Remember that? Did I tell you about that?
I do. Yeah, I do remember that one.
I mean, I literally had to find the email address for the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. I found his email address on LinkedIn, and that of his executive assistant. And I sent the profit loss statement from the prior year that showed they made $8.2 billion in profit the prior year. And I put in big red letters photoshopped it a little bit and put in big red letters like medical neglect, child abuse, and emailed it to him. And then blasted it all over social media. And by the end of the day, had it. But that was a week in, right? It took, that wasn't, I didn't start there. Okay. Like if so, you could just call me Karen, but like, I didn't start there. I started going through the proper channels and this department and that department, and the doctor submitted a thing and it got rejected. The doctor submitted another thing. They'd say, oh, once the doctor submits this, it'll be fine. And then if you're in the US right now listening to this, ADHD meds, stimulant meds are on back order everywhere because they're widely abused. So I would find them at a pharmacy somewhere and I'd be jumping through these hoops. And then by the time I kind of sort of got close, then they'd be gone. Right. Because, and then, oh, we don't know when we're getting more. And, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And all I was asking them to do with their $8.2 billion in profit surplus was just pay for the brand, just cover the brand. It was $400 a month. Just cover the brand. That's
I can't get the generic, so let me get the brand under insurance. Yeah.
I'll get the generic if it's available. If you can tell me where I can find it, go ahead, you know. And now I have a case manager. That's what happens when you're a real giant pain in the ass. Now I have a case manager at Blue Cross Blue Shield that I have a direct phone number, and I've never had a problem since. But the thing is, right, like I, you know, work 92,000 random odd job type things, like, right, like we have our thing, and you know, like, you know, I teach and I do this and I do that. So I've got like a whole bunch of little things going on, but they're all flexible, right? So I have the time to sit, you know, at my desk for an hour and a half while I'm on hold and somebody's checking back in with me every 5 minutes saying, I'm still working on that. Thanks for holding. And I'm like, no problem. I appreciate your help. And then I'm back to work and they're back to doing their thing. Not everybody can do that, right? There's people, you know, who can't take an hour and a half every single day. I mean, I
during business hours, you know, like
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I literally, have you ever cried to the point like so hard for so long that then even when you're done crying, your vision's blurry? Like, you know, when you reach that point of crying, like that's where I got that week by the time I finally emailed the Blue Cross guy. And I was like, you are the devil incarnate. Like, how do you put your head on a pillow at night knowing that you won't approve drugs for a kid who drugs have changed his life because of this? Like, it's so gross. And so it's like, these are the hurdles that people need to go through. And it's unbelievable, you know,
but don't worry. Capitalism is working exactly the way it's supposed to.
It is, right? Yeah, exactly. They're loving it because $8.2 billion later. And that's only in the state of South Carolina, right? Like that's just one state, one insurance company, one state. Oh my God, I could throw up. It's awful.
Yeah.
I liked the fact there was a thing in here on like 191 and 192. They talked about studies, basically. I'll kind of paraphrase it, right? But they talked about the fact that for every study that's done about the upside of neurodivergent thinking, right? Like the brilliance of dyslexic thinking or something like that. For every one of those, you know, there's another 10 or 15 studies that are done that only look at neurodivergence through a lens of how do we fix it? This is a problem. And I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on for a second here, but I'm telling you what it says in the book, right? That those studies are often funded by pharmaceutical companies who have a vested interest in fixing neurodivergence. Fixing, quote unquote, if you're not watching the video. I swear I'm air quoting that. You know, their idea is fixing these brain differences, et cetera, et cetera. And I am not anti-mental health med, anti-ADHD meds. I mean, I literally just tell you that I like nearly chained myself to this guy's fence in order to get my kid his ADHD meds, right? But like, and I would have done it. But it is interesting, right? Like the whole societal lens, even the medical community, it's like, how do we fix this issue, this problem? How do we cure it? You know, I mean, we talked about the puzzle piece a little while ago with Autism Speaks, right? That's the whole concept, is like they're missing a piece, right? And it's like, no, they're not, right? I mean, there's plenty to be said about a life experience of a person, an autistic individual, but missing puzzle pieces is not one of them, right? They don't need to be fixed. They're not trying to be cured, et cetera, et cetera. So I really liked that kind of realization. Like it stands to reason. It stands to make sense that that's how it would work. But having it said in the book did a lot for me. I liked the fact that it was there.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, that's one of the problems, right? Fundamentally, the vast majority of this research is paid for by pharmaceutical companies. And so of course, there's a pretty significant agenda there. And even, it's a little bit less so in other countries, but especially in the US, a lot of times the studies that are done by universities, they still have a pharmaceutical person on their oversight committee, or the board is tied in one way or another. There's unfortunately very little research around these things that isn't tied to a way to make money on fixing them instead of, a way to optimize the current.
Or right. Yeah. I liked this piece here. He quotes autistic advocate Jim Sinclair on 195, and he says he wrote a speech entitled "Don't Mourn for Us," and he argued in there, and Jim is an autistic individual, there's no normal child hidden behind the autism. Autism is a way of being, right? It's not a layer on top of something. It is the essence. It is the core. So I liked that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, kind of after that, through the rest of, well, not through the rest, but you've got then several pages where you're looking at more research, right? If you want to read and this is your thing, you should absolutely check out these pages. Like 199, I specifically had pulled out in my notes that the research is looking at correlations of both the positive and the less positive, but the things that, we're not highlighting or we're not hearing about, like ADHD equals creativity. And yeah, it might also equal impulsivity, but that leads to other types of creativity and problem solving. And, ADHD and daydreaming. Okay, fine. But daydreaming is linked to complex problem solving, according to a study from Berkeley, right? Like this is not pulled from some random place that we're going to be like, oh, like Berkeley, it's quality, you have the higher the levels of anxiety, the more likely a person is to have a high IQ. Like there are lots of things in here that like it's not this black and white that we want to make it. And there are loads more examples in these in this section of the book. So
I was thinking when you said like Berkeley, like solid university, we can trust this, right? I was thinking about what we were saying before though, about like things being half improved, because that there's a half that would be like, of course those idiots in California, Berkeley would say that, right? Like
those snowflakes. Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. And just completely discount it because it comes, and so it's like, yeah, we feel that way. Like, oh yeah, this is, a reliable study, but this is, yeah.
Yeah, but for the most
percentage.
Part, the people who are blowing off Berkeley are also blowing off our podcast. So
yeah, they're not here. I totally get that. But as far as like societal forward movement,
yeah,
that's where, they're definitely not listening to us, right? That's not happening. They gave up on us a long time ago.
Yeah. Though I was going to say a perfect segue, talking about how go, page 199, kind of start around there if you want to read a bunch of examples of positive correlations with all of these things. If you don't have the book and you would like the book, we are giving away a copy of this book. And because while we don't always get it right, we try to be inclusive here. You have your choice between an audiobook, an ebook, or a physical copy. So if you're not in the United States, we won't be sending a physical copy to you because we're not going to try to figure out the whole customs and all of that jazz. Sorry. But we will get you a copy if you're a non-US listener and you win. You can find the link to register or to enter to win rather on all of our social media channels, wherever we are. It's in the bottom of the description for the podcast, and it's on our link tree in our Instagram bio. It's all the places. The deadline is July 20th. So if you're interested, July 20th, 2024, in case you're listening some other time. So yeah, come find us there. And if you're listening in 2025, I'm sure we got some other book giveaway. So go check it out anyway. Yeah. Exactly.
Still awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely enter, because the Jonathan Mooney's book, I mean, we've talked during these meetings about eugenics and this and that and the other thing, but there's still, and I know it sounds counterproductive, or it sounds like an oxymoron, or it sounds impossible, but they're funny. His books are funny. Somehow he's taken eugenics and treated it with the weight and seriousness that it needs to be treated with, and still make us laugh while reading it, which is a magical skill as a writer.
That's it. You learn a ton, and it's a quick, easy read, which you would not ever think that you would say, oh, like all of these like tons of history and eugenics and all of this stuff. And like, oh, it's a quick, easy read. I had a great time, but it works. I'm still not entirely sure how, but it works.
He's magical. Right? Yeah.
Right. So I'm looking at our doc, and the next comment is mine. So I have on page 206, jumping ahead a little, I have a quote, and it says, I also learned from Mary, a girl with Down syndrome, when I asked her how she felt about having an aide in school. And she said, silly Jonathan, don't you know people need other people? We are not independent, but interdependent. Mutual care is a basic need of all humans. And for me, that just really struck me. Like, how true is it? And how silly that we don't remember that, because talk about a huge business, dating apps, all the things around dating and finding a partner, the focus on kids needing to find friends and how important it is for socialization and friends and kids. And then all of the things that are there around how to find friends as an adult. Okay, now you're an adult and you're not in school, and oh my God, how am I going to find friends? And like, there's a huge market, right? Like, again, capitalism at its finest. People are making a lot of money off of trying to help other people make those connections and find their people. So why is it that that's acceptable or that's desirable? But if you need people in any other kind of context for connection or help, like suddenly that's less desirable. Yeah, exactly.
Weakness. Yeah. Can't tough it out on your own, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, whatever else we want to say, right? Yeah. Completely. I saw an ad the other day, or not an ad, it was an Instagram reel that I just thought of now that you brought this up. Is it was for a tiny house community in Oregon, and you could go and buy tiny houses that were there, but then there were all these communal spaces, right? Because your house is itty bitty. There was a huge communal kitchen, so people would have their own small kitchens, but then there was a big communal kitchen. There was a game space. There was a thing with like a big projector TV and like, sofas and stuff all around where everybody could go hang out and, watch, whatever the big Game of Thrones or whatever, how there's those shows that like everybody seems to get to, be watching. But right now we're watching them all independently at home and like posting about them on social media. And their thing was like, we'll come to the community hall and watch it together. Could you stay home and watch it in your tiny house? Of course, right? They had a community garden where everybody could have a little area. They had a community workshop where if you needed to build something or borrow a tool or whatever, it was all there. And I was like, it was reminding me of other cultures or things like that, where, you'd have communal meals and all of this, right? And we've completely gotten away from that. We've isolated ourselves so much in our current world. And I sometimes look at these little examples of like things like that, or people who are homesteading, and I'm like, we're going backwards, but in a way where we're correcting the curve, right? It's like we went way too far in the other direction. And now there's people who are like, hold on, we need less material stuff. We don't need a 5,000 square foot house. We need human connection. We need to lower our impact on the earth. Like, this is our way of doing it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a beautiful community space. Like, I actually when I watched it, I was thinking like my parents would love it there, right? Like they'd be
Mm-hmm.
playing canasta and they'd be doing this, and like my mom would totally be out there gardening and talking to everybody and stuff like that, and I was like, they would love the community aspect of that, to be able to just get out. And so when you said that about like people needing one another, I'm like, that was like a gorgeous example of the way society could kind of course correct, and you could build that into your daily life. I kind of wanted to live in the tiny house village by the time I was done watching it.
I can't imagine you going from your massive space for your family. Like, okay, so Astrid needs 3 tiny houses just for her stuff, and Aiden needs this many, and Liam needs, like
We'll take this whole street, right? It might take us a while to get there, but I would love it. But the reality is, so it's funny because like a couple of moves ago, we've moved so much for my husband's job, right? A couple of moves ago, I was like, maybe, just maybe we take a break between houses and you could like go to where you need to be for work and you could get an apartment and the kids and I could just get a school bus and we'll convert a school bus and we'll just live in the school bus for a while. And we ended up with a 5,000 square foot house because that's what he wanted, and, whatever. And I was like, okay, but for me, I love, right? We just sold our camper van. We had it for a while. And I loved it, but my kids are older and some of their adventures that they have planned are international. And so we just weren't van lifing as much as we used to. And now somebody else gets to van life in our van and I'm super happy for them. But, I loved the simplicity of like, there could never be an overflowing sink because we had 2 pots, right? Like that was it. There was a saute pot and a pasta pot, like those, that was it, right? Or, there was never a mountain of laundry to be folded because when we would travel in the summers, we would only bring like 5-6 days of clothes. We'd wear some things twice and then we'd do laundry like once a week, and we were in the van. So who cared if we were gross? We were usually like in a state park and the kids were filthy and they were happy, and so I loved the simplicity of it. And one of the things that I really loved was having my babies close to me at night. Like, my bunk I shared with my youngest kiddo, and then my other kiddo, one had a bunk and then one had the sofa in the van. And I loved having them close, or like when we travel. So I think for myself personally, I love having that tiny space and like that connection and that closeness and just not feeling so weighed down by like all the stuff and the space and the to-dos and like for me, it's not for me. So, we're getting ready for a bit of world schooling adventure and I cannot personally wait to put my belongings in a backpack and have nothing with me besides what's in my backpack. Like I'm super excited. So it's going to be amazing. And I'll see just how far I can pare everybody down, because that's been my perpetual goal, is just continuing to pare down our lives a little bit. But I seem to be fighting a losing battle, unfortunately.
Oh, it's so hard, right? I mean, like in some regards, we're good at that. I mean, we're a family of 3. We live in a 2-bedroom condo. Yeah, it'd be nice to have a 3rd bedroom. So we actually have like a guest room for people to come and stay with us, sort of thing. But for the most part, we're good in a 2-bedroom condo, but we still have so much crap, like, and my husband will be like, oh, maybe we should just, break down and get a storage unit, or like someone in the building is selling one of the storage units, because they sold these like storage units in the garage that, like some people who bought when it was first built, they got them. And every once in a while, someone will put one up. And I'm like, I know, but the problem is we'll just take the crap. That's it. We'll just take the crap from here and we'll put it in there. And then for the most part, we'll forget about it. Like, no, let's just donate it. Like we don't need more stuff. We don't need to hold on to more. We can put all the Christmas decorations in half of the kids' closet and we don't need to save that much more. Right. Like, but it's hard, I mean, even when you feel like you're one of those people, it can still be really hard.
Yeah, it's true. And especially, I mean, there's 7 of us. So it's like, even if everybody's living, we're not all living completely minimalist, but even if we were, it's still 7 people, it's like, if everybody has their important things, I'm like, oh my gosh, so it's a lot, Oh my goodness.
All right,
I think
so
we
we're
both have
almost,
the final closing thought here, which I loved. What was your closing thought there?
Yeah, so I just I quoted on page 217. So actually, before I say this, I will say we've mentioned it before, but if it's the first time or you've forgotten, the last maybe fifth of the book is citations and things like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it seems like you have more to read, but you don't. And so on the final page of the actual story, on page 217, I pulled out this quote. It says, quote, "Will you choose a love of difference or chase the dream of the same? A love of difference is life. A desire for sameness is a denial of life. No human is normal, and the surest path to an unethical life is to forget that."
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, that's really solid. That's one of those things, like, instead of having all of those ridiculous inspiration posters that they have in workplaces, right? Like a quote like that would be far more useful in life in general.
Exactly. Sorry, I laughed a little bit because my brain went to those silly cartoons. You were saying something very serious, and apparently I'm not there right at the moment. And I'm like, my brain went to those things where it's like days since last accident, like workplace accidents. And then it'll say like, thanks, Kevin, or something on this. So when you said workplace signs, that's where my brain went. And I was like, apparently I'm getting
I
a
was
little too
thinking of the
punchy.
hokey. Well, I was thinking of the hokey, like the national park sign with like perseverance, across them. Like, sure, yep. Because this Excel spreadsheet really feels like climbing that mountain. Fresh air.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. All right, so the first book we read for book club, John Holt, was not your favorite. I think it's safe to say. How'd we do with this one, Amanda? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, why on earth did she make me read this? And 10 being, this is a solid recommendation I will share with friends. What do you think?
Well, if that's how we're doing it, I have to give it a 10 because I've already shared it with, like, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 people, including sharing my audiobook with my mom, who was like, I really didn't get into that first book club thing, but that second one, that normal one, how did you get that? Did you get it in a format that you can share it with me? I was like,
Oh, I
I
love
gotcha.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Shout out to Amanda's mom for picking up the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had read it before, so it was a 10 out of 10 for me, or I wouldn't have recommended that we read it. Otherwise, it would have been pretty sadistic after the last one. If I was like, ooh, I'll pick a book that sucks so bad.
To see how many awful books we can read before we lose everyone who ever wanted to join our book club.
Or Amanda quits the podcast. She's like,
you know what? That was a really interesting idea. But actually, it turns out I have to get my hair cut every week, right during podcast recording time from here on out, forever and ever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, yesterday, now it won't be yesterday when you're listening to this because this won't air till like next week, but yesterday in the real world time, Amanda and I decided to start a Facebook group, which had kind of been on our minds. And it was like, do we take the plunge? Do we not take the plunge? We took the plunge. So if you go on Homeschool or go on Facebook, look up Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We are there. You can join the group. We have some group rules there. They basically revolve around being kind and respectful. So come join us, come hang out with us. Our goal is to create a really supportive but fun place, right? So,
yes.
So come hang out with us over on Facebook at Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. We'll link it in the description here as well, but you can find us over there. And next week we've got our author interview, which is super exciting. And then what's up, Amanda?
Well, yeah, so we have the author interview next week. And then after that, we're starting a new book. So this one, neither one of us have read, but it seems promising. So we'll see. As we know, seems promising doesn't always mean it is promising.
No
But
guarantees.
Our next book, yeah, exactly. No guarantees. There will be a breakdown of the chapters that we're going to read and which weeks we're going to cover which chapters. If you want to follow along, that'll be on all of our social media channels and in our Facebook group and things like that. So you can go find that. But it's called Homeschooler's Guide to Portfolios and Transcripts by, oh boy, Loretta Hewer. I don't know. I do not know how to pronounce her last name. There are too many vowels in there. I'm not sure.
Can I buy a vowel, please? If you bought too many, no more vowels. Like the soup Nazi on Seinfeld. No more vowels for you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, so despite my butchering of her last name, the book, it provides critical advice, examples, and resources for designing the most powerful and persuasive admissions presentations. This guide cuts through the veil of mystery that surrounds the admissions evaluation process to provide frank, practical advice from public educators, home and alternative school specialists, and admissions professionals on topics. Yada, it goes on and on. But that kind of to give you an idea, right? So,
Yep.
I don't know much about this. This is definitely more Meagan's cup of tea. She does transcripts and she can help people with transcripts if that's something you're interested in. But I'm excited to kind of go through this book and we'll cover it for you and we'll give you our opinion on whether or not it's something that you actually want if you are homeschooling a little bit older kiddo, which is something that we both feel pretty passionate about, right? We have found that it's really easy to find information on homeschooling the younger kiddos. And then once you hit middle school and high school, it gets a lot harder to find people who are talking about it and sharing resources and helping guide. And so hopefully this will be a great resource.
I feel like too, even if you do have a slightly younger kid, like I talk to so many people who they don't know what needs to go on a transcript. They don't know how to build a transcript, which is all fine. I'm not picking on them for that, but they're afraid of it, right? So it's like, it's just this like mystical, phantom, scary thing, this like black hole that they're afraid of. And so I feel like a lot of times people are like, I have to do this because I'm going to need it for a transcript, but they don't even know what the transcript actually looks like or what needs to go on it. But it's like, I need it for the transcript. And so I'm like, no, you can build your homeschool life and the transcript molds to you, not the other way around. Right. Like, and so I think even if you do have younger learners, like I can be really scared of something that I don't know much about it. And then I'm almost afraid to dig into it because that's also scary. But it's like, if you just know what it is, sometimes you're like, oh, that's not nearly as scary as I had built it up to be in my head. Right. So even if you're homeschooling way younger kids, I feel like just having an understanding of like, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Or, I don't have to have that one piece of paper dictate the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, I got this, Well,
yeah,
so hopefully
I know
it'll be that experience. We'll find out. We haven't read the book yet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, hopefully that's it. Hopefully it'll be good. But I agree with you. I think a lot of people think that they need to stop homeschooling by second or third, no later than fourth grade, because they're scared of the transcript piece of it. And they think, I need to send my kid back to a regular school so that they get a transcript so they can go to college or so that they can. So at least at the very minimum, they have a high school transcript and a high school diploma. And it doesn't actually work that way. It doesn't have to be. And so hopefully this will, again, well, who knows, maybe it'll be an absolute crap book, but hopefully it will be a resource and our discussion around it, whether we agree with all the things they're saying or not, will help reassure people that like, actually, no, you can totally handle this. You can do this. And it does not need to be like the stumbling block that sends you running back to a brick and mortar school.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think even when I've read some of the worst books, I still find some decent stuff in it. So even if it's not the greatest book we've ever read, I'm still excited because there's always something to learn from just about every resource. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we pulled things out of John Holt. I'm sure we can pull things out of a homeschooler's guide to transcripts.
Yeah, I think we'll be good. All right, everyone, come hang out with us on Facebook. Like us, follow us, make us feel good, please. It makes us so happy when we get a new follower. I know, right? Please. Have an awesome week. Happy homeschooling, and we'll talk to you next week.